Hello, everyone, and welcome. My kids are just about to have lunch, but I am online to talk a little bit about this issue about names. Please shout out if you are online. I have to disclosure here that I am not an accountant. I am not a lawyer. I've studied law, but that was a long time ago. I'm not registered as a legal practitioner. I'm not able to give you particular legal advice about a structure of a company or intellectual property about trademarking. So, what I'm going to talk about is just by way of general advice from my experience. And this is based particularly on a conversation that I had with a really good friend recently who was thinking about setting up a bit of a side hustle. She was already doing some photography work and she wants to do some more sort of virtual assistant work. She's thinking about getting an ABN and she doesn't know where to start. And for most people starting out, it is really quite daunting. And you sort of think, oh, I should get a website, I should get a logo, I should get an ABN. There's a lot of things happening and it's difficult to know what to do. So like I said, I'm not an accountant. I'm not a registered lawyer. I am not in a position to give you advice, but I will try and point out those areas where it is really difficult and you might need advice. So the first place to start is you've got a name, right? So you've been brainstorming and thinking about a few names. I would really advise you, if you have a cool name, to run a bit of a sanity check, to think about what an acronym could sound like. Like we often joke that there's, the Canberra Outlet Centre, COC, sounds quite different when you pronounce it out loud. You wonder sometimes whether people had thought about that, for instance. It doesn't make it much difference from a shopping perspective, but just think about it. Like colloquially, could your name have a different meaning that you wouldn't have thought about? So maybe particularly ask the men in your life who are likely to think of some of those perhaps cruder, aspects to a name. Run it past them for a sanity check. See if you get any giggles or anything unintended. What I also do too, when I was thinking of names, when I was thinking of the Joyful Business Club, was I ran a whole series of names past people I trusted. Actually, on Facebook, I created a Facebook poll and I asked people, what name do you think is good for this particular purpose? And got their views on that. And actually, in the end, I ended up going in a totally different direction. But the feedback that I got and the input that I got about why different things resonated was really useful because, I might think that my name for something is absolutely amazing and it's going to be life changing. But I really want to know more about what other people think, especially my customers. Is this going to be something that's going to resonate with me? So that's kind of how I go about choosing a name. And I'd probably add too that there's a certain amount of intuition with this process too. There's a certain amount of having to sit with a name, think about it, feel whether it's something that resonates with you personally. Do you connect with it? So, listen to your intuition as well in terms of where you're called. But do a sanity check to make sure that, it is right with those things. So now you've got a name, you've gone through this process, you found something, you love it, it's really great. So the next step is, take it forward. Now, the first thing to do, and you'd be surprised how many people don't do this, is to check that the name is already in use. So what this means is, just a simple internet search. Just check. See if anyone else is using the name. Do a hashtag search, hashtag with the name. And then finally do a .com search. So search to see if there's any other names with .com, .com.au, or a range of different things. And I'll get to that in a little bit more detail. Now, like I said, you would be surprised how often you assume people do this basic searching step, yet they don't. Like, for instance, my Savvy Shopper column with the Daily Telegraph, that wasn't a name I came up with. That was the name that News Corp came up with. I assumed that they had registered or trademarked that name or had done some search. It turns out there is actually another Facebook group in the US that uses that. It's not active at the moment, but still, it was a sizable group in its heyday. And so that then becomes potentially problematic for me. I'm not quite sure yet, but it's their brand, it's their paper, but I just don't think that's good. Like if you're searching for it and there's another name, it sort of just doesn't make sense. So try and find something that's really quite distinctive, and do that search first. The question then a lot of people say next is, well, should I actually register my company name? Or should I register my website? What should I do first? Now, people might say to register your company, but I'm going to say to actually grab that URL. And I'm going to say that for a particular reason, which is recently I went and um, registered a business name, and I'll talk a little bit why I did that recently. I had a company, I had an ABN, but I registered some business names, and I got hit by so much spam mail. You would not believe the spam mail that I hit. So basically, a lot of companies buy up domain names. So, a cool name you might have. And so I'm just going to create a fictitious company name here because it's one that I'm never going to use. Or at least I don't think so. And that is, say, Spendy Serina. So say I've got a counterpart to the Joyful Frugalista that instead of saving, it's all about spending money and, living luxuriously, living life on the large. So I've decided I'm going to do Spendy Serina. These companies, once I register my company, they will go up and they will buy all sorts of URLs. And so these one, for instance, is to do with, because I'd registered the business name, the Joyful Frugalista. These messages said, congratulations on the registration of your new business name, the Joyful Frugalista. You could buy a domain name, thejoyfulfrugalista.com.au for $99 a year. So another one is trying to sell me the Joyful Business Club for $80 a year as a .com.au, or something with a similar name for $60 a year. And then I've got another company saying the joyfulfrugalista.com.au for $80 a year. So, they will try and sell you things because they will grab that name or any name that's similar, and then they will try and sell you to. So the race will be on once you register the name. So get the domain name first. Now, how to get the domain name? Well, there's basically search for the, .com or whatever name you want first. See what's available, so then it'll make it a bit easier when you get to a website. And then just Google, something along the lines of, buy a domain name, buy a URL, and there'll be a whole lot of different products. I think I bought previously for one called like Crazy URL or something like that. Like you can get them from literally about $15 onwards. Now, when I say $15, that's per year that you pay for the right to use that URL. Now, with time, I've learned this is actually my least preferred mechanism for doing that. Now, why? Because, okay, you can buy that fairly cheaply from, say, $15 as opposed to, say, paying $25, $30 elsewhere, but there is a little bit of technical know-how to get that URL and then to use it in your website. Now, some of it else is designing your website probably doesn't matter that much, but what I like to do is often go through WordPress and purchase that through there, which leads me to the next thing, how to develop your website. So, and just to backtrack a bit, just to think about, when you are going to be doing your business, and when you're going to use that name, because sometimes you have a plan to do a business in the near future, but you're not exactly sure what name. You might be down to 2 or 3 names and you're just trying a few things. So you might actually just want to buy up those URLs for those 12 months just to secure that name. For instance, I used to own a website, a domain name called Frugalistar, STAR, because at one stage I was thinking about whether or not to use that name. So I paid for that for a couple of years just to hold it there in case I decided to use it. And in the end, I decided not to. So if you're thinking you might want to have a particular URL, a particular name, it is actually worth buying it, grabbing it. It's a bit like Monopoly. You land on that space, you grab it so that it's yours. And so then that prevents anyone else from using it. So that's the first thing. But then if you are actually planning to use it and to use it now, the issue is what you do with your website. So there's 2 things you could do. So you could do what I've done with many other websites, which is go through WordPress, and you can do that for free or very cheaply, or you can have a self-hosted website. You could do one of the 2. Now, with a WordPress.com website, that's really useful, for instance, if all you want to do is have your website a bit like a calling card, just to say, hi, I'm a real person, I really exist. You can find me at this address. And this is what we do, but there's really not much more detail there. Like it's just pretty static. Or you're doing it as a blog where you're going to put up blog posts and information. So basically, that's quite suitable when you're not really going to have, you're not wanting to custom it in any way. You don't want to have different ads or pop-ups or do anything too fancy. You just want, something really simple, particularly something low cost. You're starting out, get your feet in the water. So you can do that through WordPress. They have a number of plans, from free to an e-commerce one at $59 a month. And as part of that process, as part of designing the name, they will give you options about registering the name. Now, there's two things they can do. One is that you could have something like, say, www.spendyserena.wordpress.com, which is usually for free. So that's not super ideal because it's got that .wordpress in there. So most people will know that that's a free site. It's not as attractive as a .com. There used to be a time where these names, the address, held a lot of kind of prestige and status and everyone wanted a .com. I think we've moved away from that slightly. I think people are looking more at the content of what's actually on the website, and they'll tend to search for things, search for the content and then go to the website or go to the website from other social media platforms. So I think that the whether it's .wordpress.com or just .com or .com.au is actually less important. And in fact, there are a lot more, domain sort of name options these days. It's not just .com, it's .com.au. The Joyful Business Club is a .club, CLUB, which I thought was pretty cool. You can have a .net. .org was traditionally for organisations, not for profits and so forth. But even now, if you feel that you're more like an organisation than a traditional business or a commerce business, you could have a .org. So there's a whole range of things. So you're not necessarily restricted just to a .com. And that's worth considering because when you're looking at your names, someone might have had the .com of exactly what you want, but you could get the .com.au. You could get, if you're in a different country, a .com.cn or China or .tw for Taiwan or .en, I think, for England. I'm not quite sure, but there's a whole lot of different things that for different countries you could get, or a .net or a .club or a whole lot of different things. So, you can often play around with your words a bit to get your sort of name. So, for someone, if you're just sort of thinking that you want to get a bit of presence, you're going to blog, you're going to share some information, this is a really cheap way to get started. All right. However, if your end state is a really professional looking website, you want it to develop it like a news site, you want to have ads on there, you want to be able to design it your own way, you want to have full control over it, then you need to self-host your website. Now, what does that mean? That means that, you pay to have it on someone else's server. So often you can use the templates from WordPress to help design it, but it's on a server. Now, just a disclosure here, I currently use the services of a local Canberra company called 4Data, which charges $12 a month for hosting. And that's actually the cheapest that I have found. Previously, I was looking at about $330 a year for self-hosting. So that is actually quite a cheap fee for self-hosting for a website, and that's actually quite a secure deal as well. So, they pride themselves on the security of their information. Now, as part of that too, their deal, particularly if you tell them that Serena sent you, there's 2 hours free consultation. So with the Joyful Business Club, I went to them and I said, this is the name I want. I'd searched it. I realized it was available. This is the name I want. They then created the website for me, gave me a basic WordPress template, and then I went away and started designing. So there's two basic ways of just starting a website. So I'm not covering design or anything else here. I'm just talking about getting your name there that you want. So you've gone from your idea, you've searched it, you've purchased your domain name or leased it for a year or 2 years. You've created a basic website, and now we're going on. The next step, obviously, is to do something about that name. So the logical first step is to get an ABN, an Australian business number. So you can do that fairly easily online. You can do it yourself. So you need to go to the Australian Business Register, which is at www.abr.gov.au. Now, to do this, it's really useful. It's not hard, but it's really useful first to think about what your company's about. It'll save you a lot of time and hardship if you get some advice and do some deep thinking at this point. For instance, if you and your bestie are going to start to be doing a business together, it's probably best that you constitute as a partnership, right? Um, or you might constitute as a company, a PTY Ltd. For many micro businesses, you are going to constitute as a sole trader, and that's how I'm constituted. But on all of these issues, like if you're unsure, do your research and get advice. Get advice from an accountant, get advice from a lawyer, because particularly if there's going to be a lot of money involved, it's really important to get it right, especially if you're doing any form of business with someone else. It is really, really important to get these fundamentals right from the beginning. I've had two collaborations slash partnerships in the last year that haven't worked out. It was traumatic for me emotionally, as both were people I thought were close friends. So not only did we lose the time that invested in working on a business idea, but also lost the friendship as well. Um, and it's quite hard actually to move forward on an idea when you've had a partnership bust up. You doubt yourself so much, or at least I did, but I moved forward from that. But it is even harder when there's big money involved, and there's big expenses involved. And so it is crucial to get these kind of things right, and to think about if you're doing business with someone else, if there's going to be, a lot of money expended, make sure that you get this structure sorted out before applying for an ABN. But anyway, so you can do it all online. I can't remember exactly how much it costs, but it's not horrific. You're talking a couple of hundred, you're not talking thousands. Um, uh, but you can do that so fairly easily. The next question with that is, do you register for GST when you are setting this up? Once again, that's another issue that you would need to get legal advice on. But in general, if you're a small business earning less than $75,000 a year, and in your startup phase, that's may well be the case. I don't want to put a limiting belief on you as a micro business, but if it's a side hustle where you're doing a little bit of extra writing on the side, or I don't know, doing some pet grooming on the side or something like that, and it's not your main hustle, it's probably going to be less than $75,000 a year, in which case do not register for GST. Because when you register for GST, you then have the responsibility for submitting the BAS statements, the business activity statements, every quarter. And, that is a fair amount of work involved in those. So if you don't have to do those, that's good. And so that then means that every time you issue an invoice, you do not charge GST. You can only charge GST when issuing an invoice if you are registered for GST. And so, yeah, so just make sure that you're aware of those two things, aware of what you've registered for, aware of your obligations with both, and so that you do the right thing by your consumers and also the tax office, because these things are important. And you can change your status. You can move from the sole company to a PTY Ltd company. You can upgrade from not being registered for GST to being registered for GST. You can change these things. But the starting point for everything is the Australian Business Register. So you've got an ABN now. So the next step is to go to ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and that's where you go to register a business name. Now, I should have mentioned this previously, but it's an interesting thing with your business name. You probably noticed this when you looking at your credit card statement, and you go, what? Who is this company? I never remember, paying some $100 for Wong and Co. something. What on earth was that? And then you think about it some more. It's like, oh yeah, it was that dumpling restaurant we went to, and their shopfront name might have been something different, but their company that they're registered in had a completely different name. So you can really register your name with anything you want, pretty much. And so long as you describe genuinely what your business is about, you can do that. But it's usually good to have it to be fairly close to what your business is. In my case, I registered my business back in 2017 when I thought my main business was going to be producing soy sauce. I know it's a bit strange, right? From soy sauce to writing, there was some logic with it. I won't go into it, but as a consequence, my business name is based on what was going to be my brand at the time, which is based on my Chinese name. So my Chinese name is Bai Shenglian, which translates as white flowering lotus. So my ABN is under the name of white flowering lotus. But over time, what I've realized is that it's confusing for people, particularly when they sign up with courses and they get an invoice, or a confirmation back from White Flowering Lotus. And they're like, well, I thought you were Serina, the Joyful Frugalista. What the hell is going on? So, to avoid that confusion, recently I've registered my business name. So, I've registered the Joyful Frugalista and the Joyful Business Club. So, that then prevents someone else from saying, hey, I am now the Joyful Frugalista and I'm now developing, a business with that name and confusing people potentially. So I now do that, and that costs $87 for each name, and it was a fairly easy this process to go through with ASIC. So to register your business name, and also to register your trading name, you go through, ASIC. So you can search for the Joyful Frugalista and you'll find that. And it's quite a good thing too to go to that ASIC register and check out what competitor names you might be there before even you look at registering your .com or anything else. And certainly before you do your branding, before you spend any money developing a brand, make sure there's not a business name that's doing something similar. So you've got all those processes. You've got your URL, you've got your .com.au or whatever else you've got. You've registered for an ABN. You've gone to ASIC. You've registered your business name in Australia. All set, right? Well, there's a few more things. One is a potential scam. Well, it's not really a scam, but it'll certainly save you money if you remember this to be aware of. And that is that once you've registered with ASIC, the fact that you have to renew your registration for your trading from time to time, depending on how long you've paid it for. Usually it's about 2 years, something like that. There are private companies who can do this process for you, and they constantly look at the dates and they will send you a renewal notice before it's due, and that renewal notice will be more expensive than what you'll do through ASIC. So make sure if you receive a renewal notice, look at it closely before you pay it. Particularly look down the bottom and see who's issued it. If it's a private company, just bypass them and go straight to the asic.gov.au website, asic.gov.au website, and go and renew that through there. So that's your business name. Okay, so you've done all of these things, and then, okay, say suddenly, then you notice, but, do I really own that name? Do I really have a patent on that name? And what about any artwork? Say you've created a really cool logo. So going back to this Spendy Serena idea. So imagine that I've created a fabulous logo that's got lots of gold coins and, really bright red dresses and things like that. And, Spendy Serena. And, I've printed it on t-shirts. It's now branded on all sorts of different products, tote bags or whatever. So, the brand is big, like, the Coca-Cola of the Spendy world, Spendy Serena as a brand. What then is to stop a competitor using that? And, it could be important. Like I remember my mum was a fashion designer. Back in the 80s, she had a particular screen printed design of sort of fish that was very big, that kind of bright colouring in the 80s. Not quite Ken Doan style, but, really bright and colourful and big. And her screen printer sold it off to someone else. Now, she hadn't patented it, so there wasn't much she can do. So to avoid that, it is wise to consider trademarking. Now, if you are just a little side hustler who is settling out and, obviously you want to protect your brand and you want to protect your name, but you do have to think about the cost benefit analysis. You have to think about the risks. But if your whole business really hinges around a really, really, really cool name, and a cool logo and cool artwork, it's really important to consider, applying through IP Australia, Intellectual Property Australia online to patent that. So I've done that recently for both. I've put in an application for both of my names, the Joyful Frugalista and the Joyful Business Club. That was for a few reasons, but I just sort of really felt that, particularly in the Frugalista space, I was getting quite well known as being that name, the Joyful Frugalista. It was becoming more and more of my brand. I even have, like a mug and products. I don't sell these commercially, by the way. I don't make money from them, but one of my listeners, the lovely Yvette, and readers, she wanted a copy, and I managed to get her a copy at cost. But I might sell those. I might sell other branded products. It could be other things I do. So I'm now in that realm now where I'm becoming more and more well known. I didn't want someone else to steal what I see as my own name and my own brand. So I applied through IP Australia online. Now, it was relatively straightforward. Now, I'll say relatively, but it did require some thought. Now, of course, there's always a risk benefit with everything here. For every category that you apply for to trademark your name, and including your image, it costs $250. Now, within a category, there's lots of different things, and so you can tick lots of different things within that category. But if you pick things from another category, it's another $250. So when I searched for podcasting, for instance, it came up across about 3 or 4 different categories. Now, I'm not yet at that league where I've got, millions and millions of followers. I'm not yet the Oprah of Australia where I'm really, really worried about people taking off this name. It's more that I'm concerned that I'm building a profile, so I want to protect it a bit more. So it is a bit of a risk benefit here. So I was comfortable with only selecting those that were in that same category. But I did make sure that I did that. IP Australia is developing a new online tool that's going to make this process a lot easier. But I got about halfway through, and then the online platform froze for me, and they did that several times. Maybe it's something to do with the operating system I'm on, but it didn't work. So therefore, I was using their old system, and it is a bit clunky. Some people like to go through and get legal advice on doing this, and that can be quite useful, especially when your brand, your name, your logo is really, really important and integral to your business. Now, you might think, well, so what? But like I said, my mum had this experience in the 80s as someone else, a screen printing company, stealing her designs and on selling it. The cost to your business can be thousands and thousands of dollars if that's kind of how integral your brand is to you. So it's worth thinking about that. What would be the risk to your business if someone else stole your name? So if you're in a small side hustle stage, say you're, doing some pet grooming for your neighbors and your friends, and everyone knows you as, I don't know, Polly's Poodle Service or something like that. I'm just thinking random names. I don't even know if there's a business that exists with that. And so someone else comes and they think that's really cool and they register for Polly's Poodle Tools, and you get told not to use it. I mean, what is going to be the risk to your business? I mean, your friends and your family, they already know you've got good service, you've got referral from your customers. Probably not much. You could just, change to Pet Poodle Service or Polly's Cats and Dogs or whatever it is, and it wouldn't have a huge impact on your business. In fact, a lot of businesses do change their names, especially quite frequently, especially in the early phases. But if it's like the Coca-Cola, can you imagine if Coca-Cola suddenly changed their name? Would it be the same? Or McDonald's, would it be the same? It would be quite a shift for them to change their name. There's a lot of capital and value that's attached in that brand, especially when you spent many years building up that brand. So it's really worth thinking about how valuable that brand is to you, how valuable that is, and to safeguard that. And if you're in any doubt, get expert legal advice to do that. But whatever you do, don't ignore it. If you feel that your brand is important to you, make sure you trademark it, which, like I said, I have put in applications recently for both of mine, and both of my businesses I did under one particular category and selected as much as I could in that one category that I felt described my business. And I guess digital businesses are unusual, but they were still categories. There's still podcasting, there's still webinars, there's still web blogging as categories and so forth that I could select, which was really fascinating. And I did that. So that is a bit of a history of what I've been doing. I would love to hear some experiences of people who've done it recently or have been thinking about doing it recently. Like I said several times, I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an accountant, nor am I a website designer or a service provider. But, just to recap, this is what I would do first is, number one, I would just search on the internet to see, is there another name that's similar or the same as what I want? Number two, I would go and I'd register a URL so that I can make sure that I can get an online name that would be like that. And actually, in this day and age too, it's not just the URL. You'd probably, now that I think of it, you'd be doing your Facebook and your Insta. So getting all of those names aligned and, setting up your accounts and doing that. With the website, you might want to just hold the URL for a while, or you might want to go ahead and develop one. And just to think early about whether you're just going to be a bit low level for a while and then upgrade to self-hosted, or whether you're going to go self-hosted straight away. But either way, think about what you're going to do with the website, how integral the website's going to be with your business, and then what you're going to do. Number 4 is to go to the the business dot. I've got to remember the name of it now. The Australian Business Register, and register for an ABN, an Australian business number. So go to abr.gov.au and register for that. Think about what your company is going to be like. If you are just starting out, you're probably going to be a sole trader, but think through that. If you're doing something with a friend or family member, think really, really carefully about partnership or company obligations and how you're going to constitute yourself, and think about the worst case scenario about if things go wrong. Number 5 is to go to ASIC, the Australian Security Investment Commission, and to register your business name. So you'll need your ABN to do that, but to register your business name to do that. And keep in mind that you can have a different business name to your trading name. So you could have, say, the top being, I don't know, sparkling something as your business name, and then Spendy Serina, Spendy Kate, or different things that are underneath it for trading names. So that's number 5. And then number 6 is to think about whether or not you need to trademark your name. And if you do need to trademark your name, logo, artwork, or anything else, is to go to IP Australia, Intellectual Property Australia, and register it with that. I can't stress more than enough that if you think that your brand is really integral to your business and that losing your brand could really affect your business, do the right thing now. Register it. It will be some initial cost, which can be hard for a startup business, but it is much better to be safe and be sorry. And if there are some peculiarities about your brand, if it's really, really important, get legal advice, because it's much better to get it earlier than to get it later. Thank you so much. Would love to hear in the comments and feedback what you thought and what was useful, and also especially what your pathway has been like. What has worked for you? What have you done? Have I got things right? Have I got things wrong? Is there something I don't know about? Because if so, I need to do some relearning myself. Thank you very much.